Can you, oh, that's better. Can you hear me now? Can, uh,
Thank you, Louise, and hello everyone. Welcome to OTF Connects. Thank you so much for giving of your valuable time to join us tonight. I am Sirius Skirhan, facilitator and coordinator of the OTF Professional Development Project. I am delighted to welcome Marcy Becker and Lynn Wilkins, who will be facilitating tonight's webinar on supporting teachers in the use of inquiry through the revised social studies, history, and geography curriculum. I'll give you a bit of background to this resource. In 2012, OTF partnered with a number of subject associations to develop an environmental education resource that, or resources that would support teachers in environmental education and also support the new social studies curriculum, which was in the works at that time, and doing all this with an increased focus. I had the pleasure of working with both Marcy and Lynn, who were members of the OESTA writing team, and they developed, along with others, developed this resource that they will be presenting tonight, which is, by the way, posted on the teacher resource section of the OTF website, and I know that Louise will post the link later, and we'll show you how you can access this resource so that you can use it tomorrow in your classroom if you wish. I know that Marcy has spent many, many hours tweaking the resource so that it would best support the increased focus of the revised social studies curriculum. And they do have a lot to share with you tonight, so I'll pass the mic over to them. Welcome, Marcy and Lynn.
well, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
That's not too bad, Marcy. You could maybe turn your microphone volume up a teeny tiny tad.
Okay, is that better? Is that better? Okay.
How's that sound, everyone? You can give us a green check mark if everyone can hear okay.
That's awesome. I just keep pushing my microphone on my headset down, which I'm afraid is getting so low that you're going to hear my stomach growling. But if you can hear me, so. Okay. Well, we can keep giving feedback about that, and Louise is awesome and can also sort of help adjust volume and support you and to make sure that you're hearing everything clearly. Thanks so much, first of all, for spending an evening having this professional dialogue with Lynn, myself, and everyone who is participating. Seems like we're also competing with a hockey game, and it's a lovely, wonderful weather that we're having. So thanks so much for coming, and we're really looking forward to doing this and hearing people's comments. That's certainly what makes it very interesting, is the ongoing collaboration and a little bit, okay, sorry, I'm going to pause here. Is that a little bit better, Louise?
That might be. When we hear you say a few more consonants, we'll be able to. It's just when any of those sounds you make that kind of has a little puff of air coming out of your mouth, that's the microphone's picking up those puffs. So sometimes moving the microphone a little bit under your chin so it's not in the line of those puffs of air, sometimes that helps.
That's what I was saying before, that it's so low, I'm afraid you're going to hear my stomach growling. Is that a little bit better?
That's not too bad. And you know what? I think we can hear you okay, and we'll grow accustomed to it because we really appreciate that you've got that fancy headset. From
I was going to have apologies for I borrowing one of my students' headsets, which is way better quality than my own personal headset. So, but then you pick up all the breathing and all of that. In any case, I am a special education teacher with the Toronto District School Board, and my areas of interest are special education, Aboriginal education, and very much for the last 5 years. I've been working quite extensively with OESTA, which is the Ontario Elementary Social Studies Teachers Association, on curriculum development projects, on managing and writing some curriculum projects with OESTA. So that's a little bit about myself, and my co-presenter Lynn is going to tell you a little bit about herself.
Hi everyone, I hope that you can hear me as well. I'm Lynn Wilkins. I'm also a teacher with the Toronto District School Board. I'm fortunate enough this year to be on a 4/5 and have done some traveling in Africa, and I've been to schools in Tanzania and South Africa, and it's been a really great experience. And I've been able to see some schools and what they're doing, which has helped me because I'm also involved with obviously the curriculum writing for the new document, the guide to support that, and also working with an NGO that I'm helping set up to support inquiry between classrooms around Canada and the world. So it's really exciting to be involved with this particular project, and I'm hoping that you'll be just as excited as we are by the time we're finished this presentation.
Okay. So the webinar is being presented in the spirit of inquiry, and so we are trying to act as facilitators with this process. In the spirit of inquiry, we are going to possibly adjust as we see fit to meet the needs of the participants based on questions that come up, on people's understanding of what we're saying or of things that need to be clarified, while still keeping in the with the big idea or the overall goals of the webinar. And one of the strategies that we're doing to present in this way is knowledge mobilization, or a knowledge building strategy. And it's a very effective strategy when using inquiry in the classroom, a knowledge building circle, which is essentially generating knowledge, building one's own knowledge as well through questions or communications with others in a community of learners. So as I said, this is a very interactive webinar, and we really encourage your participation through chatting, through ongoing questions, and through comments or responses to what we're doing or other participants. So one of the ways that we're and the goals of our agenda in terms of how we're going to try to achieve this is by talking a little bit about this guide that Syria had referenced earlier, the inquiry guide, which will help teachers in implementing the revised 2013 Social Studies, History, and Geography curriculum. The guide contains elements of about inquiry. There are lessons in the guide. It also addresses the thinking concepts. There's the many new things that have come out in the social studies curriculum. There's a real shift in the pedagogy. Inquiry is the pedagogy that's newer for social studies teachers. And as I said, there's also changes in content. There are thinking concepts now that are coming out that ended up that get embedded in the content in the lessons, and as well as there is success criteria that is helping to support the assessments of the lessons and of any of the expectations. So you'll find all of those things in the inquiry guide, and we'll talk more about it a little bit later as we're going. So that is our agenda, is to deconstruct elements of the curriculum and also demonstrate ways that you can do this across subjects. So I hope that that's clear. If anyone has any questions. we also are very interested in your learning goals and what your agenda is for signing up for this webinar. And we'd like to ask two things. One is that we had introduced ourselves, and we'd love to see what where people are from and what they're teaching this year. So perhaps in the chat, if you can introduce yourself, and also if you could please add in sort of some of your learning goals, some of the things that you're wondering about, what you hope to learn coming out of the webinar and throughout the webinar, that would be helpful as well. So if you could just take a minute or two just to do that in the chat box, that would be great. Oh. Okay, Louise, look at all of those chat bubbles.
Oh, yes, just commenting
so
on
sorry. You know what?
Typing there at the side.
I apologize because I had raised my chat box up high, so I couldn't see if anybody is wanted to say something. Okay, so it looks like, so Debbie, resources available, yes. Historical inquiry, assessment, resources, yes. Oh wow, okay. Okay. Digital activity. Okay. Okay, so we will, and Lynn, please feel free also to chime in with any of the comments that are in the chat. We will, as much as possible, address these questions. It seems like assessment is coming up a lot. Okay, I'm going to just move on, and we'll be able to go back to some of these questions. And I would also encourage you to be mindful of what your learning goals are, and please continue posting questions that you want to get answered if they haven't been addressed yet throughout the presentation. Okay, yes, please raise your hand and ask questions right while we're going through the slides. Okay, so moving forward, glad to see some of your agenda items, and thank you for sharing those. We're going to start with an open-ended question, which is typical of inquiry. We'd like to just have you actually use the text tool, right, the A, if you can, and we're going to try to create a mind map here of what is inquiry, what you think inquiry is, what are some of the critical elements of inquiry, what it might look like in a classroom, what it would sound like, what it feels like, what's happening, all these kinds of things. If you could try to do that, that would be great. And you could do that right by using that right onto the Blackboard page there. Oh, here we go. Okay, by using either the capital letter A is probably the easiest way, the text tool. Exploring new ideas. I like that curiosity, sometimes messy. Messy is good in inquiry because it allows you to adjust, have ongoing adjustment to what is really meeting the needs of the students, digging deeper in what we see what students already know. That's great. That's very much elements of inquiry. Exploring their queries. Student-driven, very much so. That's where we're talking about a big shift in the pedagogy. Student inquiry in the, well, in many subject areas is student-driven, so that we're not the ones, the teachers are not the ones who are leading the inquiry sessions, that you give students a lot of opportunity to continue to pose questions, comment on other people's questions, and learn from them while they're sharing their own knowledge. That's the knowledge building that I was referencing before. I'm not sure that people know this, but by the way, I think this is really great, and I'm really pleased that that we have the opportunity to have this. All of this word web will now stay and be part of our archived webinar, so it can be a resource that you can use as well. Just the what is this web right here? What is inquiry? Okay, there are really good ideas here. Creating a question to research, that's definitely part of social studies inquiry. Formulating questions. I'm trying to ignore it, but temporarily. But Lynn is giving really good feedback to people who are posting in the chat. I see student-driven is the key to inquiry. Allows people to make mistakes. So please reference the chat ongoing throughout the webinar so that you have the great opportunity to sort of hear from myself and from the participants as well. As I said, we're really trying to just be facilitators as part of this dialogue. So the dialogue is what we're doing right now, this open-ended question of what is inquiry is very much also being led by your comments. So that's great. Okay, I have, it looks like there's a couple more questions, so I'll just wait a minute, but I'll just say going forward that I have a video clip that I'd like to show that is about inquiry in action. So I'm going to go there to the next slide. Louise is able to play this clip online. However, I've also included the link at the bottom. It's from the Galileo organization, which is a great organization all about inquiry and more. And there's many resources on there. The clip will, if you could start the clip at 2 minutes and 21 seconds, then that will get that sort of, I just took a section of it, so that will give you the greatest idea about inquiry in a social studies context.
Okay, Marcy, I'm just going to switch over to the web tour, folks. If you experience some lagginess or the video does not show up in our new space that I'm about to create here, we've also posted the link in the chat under Galileo Organization. You can click there. You will need to manually control the slider to play that video and slide it to the time point that Marcy recommended you go to, which is 2:21. And Marcy, I know that we're already just a little bit past 8 o'clock, so if at any time you want to pull people back earlier, by all means do that. Otherwise, folks, when you get to about the 10-minute mark, give us a green check mark to let us know that you're done, and we'll return back to the whiteboard.
while we're waiting for that to pop up on the screen, I also want to encourage people to make comments in the chat room about what's being played on the video. Thanks, Louise. Seems like we're having a little bit of delay with the web tour. Louise, is it working at your end?
Yes, but everybody needed to click on the video controls themselves. Carol, did you, or Peter, did you not see the website there with the video embedded? And I know I'm speaking over people whose videos are working just fine, so I'm going to turn off my mic and type in the chat.
Me too, sorry about that.
Okay, so it looks like we've moved back to the whiteboard. Sorry about any of that difficulty there. So whenever we put something in the web tour, anytime it doesn't seem to work quite well for you, we have also posted the link in the chat, and you click on the link in the chat and that will open in your own browser window. It should have far less issues. Right now I actually only see a bandwidth delay for Natasha that seems to have cleared. I'm going to put those instructions in the chat, and that video is quite a good in-depth video. You'll certainly be able to refer to that later. Back to you, Marcy.
So if people could just let me know, the video is about 7 minutes. If people may, I'll just maybe wait a couple more minutes just so people can get a little bit of a sense of the video. The teacher is Amy Park, and she is talking about a great inquiry project that she did on the Inuit people, which also embeds a lot of the thinking concepts from the social studies curriculum. So I think I'll just wait a couple of minutes, and then we'll continue on with the webinar. If people can look in their own web browsers, please. Okay, so just considering the time, and I apologize for the technical difficulties with that. We do have a couple of other clips to show later. We may ask you to go to your web browser again a little bit later on. But it just, and that's fine, it's just a resource that gives you a great idea for a project, an inquiry project, and shows inquiry in action. So no worries if you were not able to look at the webinar, look at the video clip that was embedded right now. And I would encourage you to look at other resources that are available from the Galileo organization. Okay. So the inquiry process in social studies, history, and geography is, as I said, that the webinar is being conducted in the spirit of inquiry, and the inquiry process in social studies, history, and geography is similar to inquiry across disciplines, math or science. However, it's really important to note that in social studies, the inquiry process does not have to sort of flow from formulating questions, gathering and organizing information, interpreting and analyzing that information or data, evaluating and drawing conclusions, and communicating. It certainly doesn't have to happen all in one lesson as well. We consider inquiry in social studies, history, and geography to be sort of nonlinear. It can also start by examining an artifact or an image, and or you can look at evidence, and that can be a lesson. It's not sort of like doing a science experiment where you go through the whole process and you have to come up with an answer to a hypothesis, or a math lesson where you have learning goals and you're trying to figure out the answer to the problem, and you do that, and that's the whole lesson. So lessons, and we have examples of lessons in the guide that just highlight and model some of these particular elements of inquiry. So we wanted just to note that the process can be go in other order, and you don't have to flow through the whole process in social studies. This was information that actually became evident through PD that was happening, our own PD or PD within our board, that was sort of one of the key misunderstandings of the inquiry process in social studies, is that with the gaps in this process, and that it didn't need to be in that way. And the approach in the implementation of this process is also that the whole process is on a continuum, so that students can build inquiry skills that are increasing in complexity as they move through the divisions. And of course, elements in inquiry in the early grades, in primary grades, are going to look different than in junior grades, where students have already engaged in research and and so already have some of those skills. It's also intended to develop critical thinking skills and understanding of the inquiry of the social studies, history, and geography thinking concepts. So, so I'm just going to see if there's any questions at this point, just in terms of what inquiry is, what it is a little bit more specifically in social studies, history. I'll stick with social studies for now, because Lynn's going to talk about the inquiry process in geography. So if there's any questions, please post those in the chat. Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about geography and inquiry in geography and what that is going to look like. My goal here is to basically kind of take you through what makes inquiry in geography special. Some of the lessons that we have in the guide that will help maybe introduce inquiry in geography to your classroom, and also serve as kind of a template to further develop inquiry, not only in geography but in other subjects that you have to teach. And so to start off, I wanted to also share with you some little projects that I've done around inquiry, to show you that you can kind of figure this out and move through it with the students as you go. So one of the big questions that I remember asking myself was, what will students need to be effective geographers in the year 2022? Because that's the approximate year that the kids that we're teaching now in the intermediate will be going out into the workforce. So I've made kind of a chart listing skills, fundamental ideas, knowledge, and attitudes. So if you use the text tool, maybe I'll give you 2 minutes to fill in what skills do you think we need to have for these students when they're going into the world in 2022 to be geographers. What kind of knowledge would we want them to have, and what kind of attitudes would we want them to have going forward? So if you want to just take a minute and type in some things, that'd be great. one more minute just to fill in the chart, 'cause I know we're tight for time, but a lot of good ideas so far. Global vision, empathy, communication, critical thinkers, so important going forward. I love the comments about looking at how things are connected. I'm very much interested in ESD, or Education for Sustainable Development, and looking at interrelationships. So that's really important going forward for our students to have that understanding. Okay, so thanks for those inputs, guys. Those are great, and I always try to keep in mind the age group that we're teaching and the kids that we're teaching, because when I think back to looking at what life was like when I was 13, which I try to think was not that long ago, but I mean, I remember, when we used to have floppy disks, and you actually had to know how to use a road map to find things and to locate things. Cell phones were just coming out, and Zach on Saved by the Bell had this really cool big cell phone, but there was no internet. There was no Wikipedia or Facebook or Instagram or all these sources of information that kids have access to now. So it almost seems like it might have been a lot simpler for when we were 13. And today we have students in our classrooms that are witnessing technological changes that are faster than you can even imagine. And they have access to information in an instant. I think we've all been there where someone's asked a question, we might not know the answer, and then all of a sudden some students that has already Googled it and is able to tell you. So the information is there, and they can get it very, very quickly. And the technology is there, it's just teaching them how to use it properly. And on top of all of that progress with technology, students are also faced with economic, environmental, and social sustainability issues that we haven't been faced with before. These are all new problems, global climate change, unemployment now, especially with our youth. So to be cognizant of that world and what they're going into, and as geographers, what that means, that the skills that they're going to have, they need to be able to observe patterns and associations in spatial order, and to understand the connections between different aspects of the world, able to utilize geotechnologies and satellite images, graphs, sketches, diagrams, photographs, and so on. So for us, it's really important to keep that in mind, and then being cognizant of the fact that they're going to be having to deal with all these problems that we have. And that's what's great about this new curriculum, and the guide that supports it is we're looking at how to prepare our students for this world that they're entering. And what's great is that the guide allows us to have, and the new curriculum allows us to move from a traditional approach in teaching to a more inquiry-based approach in teaching. Some people call it the 21st century classroom, but it's that same idea that we're moving from a teacher-centered approach to a student-centered approach. And that is the essence of inquiry, and that's what the guide is really helping you introduce into your classroom. And it really becomes this amazing experience for teachers as you become part of the classroom. You become a co-constructor of knowledge with your students, and you are a facilitator and you're a guide, because you're not going to have information as fast and as quick as Google. But you need to show them how to utilize Google effectively, and how to use the resources effectively, and work with students to be able to develop skills and master skills as they work through. And the most important thing, I think, at the end of the day is to have students, we teach them how to think, to be self-motivated, to have perseverance, and have the skills that are going to make them successful global citizens going forward. So at the bottom of your slide that you'll see right now, Geography of the 21st Century, is a link to a YouTube video. And that YouTube video is about 1 minute and 26 seconds. And before you click on the link that I just put into the chat box, basically what this was is an example of inquiry in the classroom where the teacher has to learn, you've got to be a little bit fearless, because you have to be okay with not being the expert in the classroom anymore, and being able to look to your students for some expertise from them, because they're the ones that are really great with technology. They're not afraid of technology, and they're able to tackle it creatively and effectively. So this video is an example of doing a part of a larger project that I was doing with students, and they're designing a sustainable building of their choice. They had to create a floor plan and design a 3D model. And I was lucky enough to have the Computing Strategy 2.0 in the TDSB in my classroom. And so I had a really tech-savvy students who wanted to do more than just a two-dimensional floor plan on paper. So they noticed that we had some software programs, Geometry Sketchpad and Google SketchUp, both of which I hadn't used before. Google SketchUp I hadn't used at all. And it was one of those moments where they said, Ms. Wilkins, can we try it? And I just said, sure, let's go ahead. And we worked through it together as a class. And they had such an amazing product that I wanted to show some of their work at a in-service I was doing. And I said to the kids, I wish I could, get your images off the computer to show everybody, but I don't know how to do the screen captures. And at the end of the day, I had a student walk up with a USB and said, it's all done, Ms. Wilkins, I've put together a video for you. It took a little while to get past the TDSB firewalls, but I managed to do it. I kind of didn't want to hear that part, but he managed to put a video together for me. So if you click on the design process link that both Louise and I posted, you can watch the video. It's, like I said, it's 1 minute and 26 seconds. So maybe if you could give a check mark when you're done, that would be great.
It's also just going to drop that link into the web tour again, but the link is in the chat, so use whatever one works best for you.
Okay, so I think most people should be done viewing it at this point. So that was just an example of kind of letting go of control, respecting the students' ability to learn, because they really figured it out together, and I learned along with them how to use those programs. And it really all started by them saying that they wanted a more interactive model on the computer to show their clients, because they were in companies when they were designing these buildings. So it was tough as a teacher to admit that you basically, I mean, I was asking students how to do certain things, but it was also a really great experience and an empowering experience. And the greatest part was watching them become experts through their own learning and helping each other and being a part of that. So going forward, when we're specifically speaking about inquiry in geography, we're looking at what makes the inquiry process in geography different from, say, inquiry in other subject areas such as science or math. And the key to geography is that questions are rooted geospatially. So you're really focused on where it's located. So why is it there? What's the significance of that location? And looking at basically the consequences of the location of what it is that you're looking at. So that's basically, when you're talking about geography, you always have to keep in mind the spatial aspect of the inquiry process. So when you look at the inquiry process, it's very similar to inquiry processes in other subjects. And Marcy showed you earlier the inquiry process that's in the guide, that's also in the curriculum, and it's very similar to obviously the geographic inquiry process, except for with geography, you're formulating geographical questions, and you're using geographic information when you're organizing and gathering data sources and analyzing and interpreting that information. So it's very similar, and that's the great thing about inquiry, is that once you have a basic understanding of the process itself, you can begin to adapt it to all subjects, and it's very applicable. I mean, the project that I've done that I just showed you was also media literacy as well as language inquiry project as well. So it does lend itself to other subjects. And I find one of the ways that we've tried to make it, I guess, easy to understand and easy to utilize is the biggest definition that you'll see now for geography is the what is where, why there, and why care. So that's the kind of geography that definition that a lot of people are working off right now, because it really highlights that geospatial aspect of geography, and that's really the defining feature of geography. So if you want to utilize that definition, if you're still struggling maybe with inquiry, if you are overwhelmed with the thinking concepts in the curriculum as well, you can utilize this definition to help you focus what it is that you're doing. So for example, the what is where, if you break down the what is, you're looking at a feature, whether it's physical or human, and the where is the location, so spatially, right? And you're looking at distribution patterns, trends, and things like that. And that's where you're starting to ask those questions about why is it located there, and where is it located. And then once you're having that discussion, you start to look at the why there component. And that's when you get into the interrelationships, the patterns and trends, and the spatial significance. So you're addressing the thinking concepts in geography, as well as moving through that inquiry process. And then the why care, which is probably one of my more favorite components, because you're looking at the cause and consequence of things, you're looking at perspective, kids are taking action, and they're looking at the importance of things. So it really does, if you can gain a hold of that definition, it can really lead you through developing inquiry in your classroom in geography. And the guide is a really great source for that, because you'll see in the geography lessons that we've put forth, you'll see that we've highlighted the components of the definition that are involved with each lesson, and highlighted the thinking concepts involved with each lesson, and the components of the inquiry that's involved in each lesson. So you can start to see how they relate, and essentially use that as a template for developing your own inquiry going forward, maybe after you've tried the ones that we've developed for you and become comfortable with those. So again, if you have any questions, you can buzz in at any time. But looking at, for example, another type of inquiry project that I did with my students was a community project. So this relates to the grade 8 curriculum. So you're looking at global settlement patterns and sustainability in grade 8. And you're looking at human settlement, interrelationships between human settlement and sustainability, and then the ability to demonstrate understanding of what that is. So what I wanted to do with my students was, as part of that bigger project that I was mentioning that you saw the design video for, there was also an urban planning component. So I wanted them to be able to understand what a sustainable community looks like, what that means for land use, settlement patterns, transportation, and how human settlement both affects and is affected by the environment. It's a very complicated process, and it's very easy to talk at the students, but what's more valuable is, again, with inquiry, starting off from what they know, and they know their own neighborhood. So a starting point of looking at urban planning and human settlement patterns was looking at the students' neighborhood. So we had a discussion about it, and the students asked the question, what makes a neighborhood worth caring about? And from there, we developed questions about what makes a community sustainable, how does the environment impact the community, and all of those questions and the answers to those questions came out of the video that they were able to produce, all based on that question that they posed about what makes a neighborhood worth caring about. They got into partners, they analyzed their community, they created a little mini video diary. This particular video is about 3.5 minutes. It was made by 2 students in my class. And we had probably about 20 videos to wade through after, and that was the jump-off point for designing our urban city center for our buildings, was looking and analyzing the students' work and finding common threads throughout, asking further questions based on what students came up with, and gathering that information. So we can do again, if we can try, Louise, to put it into the web browser, or we can put the YouTube link in the chat box and take a look. And it's 3.5 minutes, so maybe give you 4 minutes to look through it. Okay, it looks like most people are done looking at the video. So that's, again, an example of small inquiry inside a larger inquiry project. So the main point about that was that the jump-off point was what the students knew, because we were getting into really complicated issues around Jane Jacobs' urban planning principles. And what became really interesting was that, and I think Leslie, you mentioned this earlier, but open-ended questions, and I forget who else mentioned something about how do you make sure you're covering the curriculum, is that you're guiding the kids, but often their questions are really relevant. And these videos, what came out of it was they were able to come up with the components that made a community sustainable by analyzing their own thoughts about what made a community worth caring about. Because the elements that were worth caring about were usually those things that make sustainable communities, whether it's social, environmental, or economic fabric. So it was really a great process. This was the first year that I've done it this way, and it was amazing for me to see what they were able to come up with, and then see how far they were able to push their understanding of urban planning just based on their own observations and knowledge, and then using their own knowledge and observations, they were able to make really great links and really educated links to issues. And then that would be able to bring further into looking at global issues of sustainability and urban environments and things like that. So that's a little bit of an idea about a little inquiry project that you could do. And it can be done throughout the grades. It's very adaptable to different grades. So when you're looking at examples of the lessons in the guide, you're looking at, again, the grade 7 curriculum was our focus that we worked on, or I worked on in particular. And as you can see, the lessons were 4 parts. They could be stretched out over almost kind of a 2-week period to make it an inquiry unit. And the whole concept started with looking where our stuff comes from. So, you know, why is it made there? Where is it located? And then moving through the impact of that stuff when it's made on the natural environment. And then again, you're addressing those issues of that you'll find in the definition about you know, why there, why care, and the thinking concept. And moving through until that they're at a point where they can actually see the production cycle and start to understand how to make changes to that cycle. So for example, some of the work that my students came up with, you'll see at the top here is, you know, where our stuff comes from. And some students use Post-its to show where, for example, the clothing that they were wearing on that particular day had been made. On the right is an example of students who chose an item that they, you know, had at lunch, a cup of coffee, which they probably shouldn't be drinking, and then located the different countries where all the components of that cup of coffee that they enjoyed at lunch came from. Some of my students really liked infographics, so when it came to communicating the impact of some consumption, they wanted to make some infographics, so they researched infographics and created one on water consumption and just the basic idea of purchasing goods. And then the last 2 ones on the bottom, you'll see impact of choices and altering a negative impact, was some of the units that we've designed for the guide are based on The Story of Stuff, which is a really great book and has great resources in addition to the ones that we've provided you in the guide. And the students came up with some artwork that they showed what they felt was maybe a negative way of consuming, and then a decision that they could make that they felt was maybe a more positive way of consuming goods. So again, it does allow for those integrations because you can see we're using art, we're using multimedia, and it's all in the spirit of inquiry, and students' interests are really driving this. So, and you'll see at the bottom, I just included the blog that I've had, that dowehavegymtoday.com, because you can see a lot of these lesson plans there as well. So if you have any questions, guys, feel free to come on the mic or text into the chat box. And Marcy, I'll pass it back over to you.
Whoops, I have to turn on my microphone there. I'm just a little concerned just with respect to the time. So I'm going to try to get through our next many slides quickly, but please give some feedback if there is an area that you'd like to spend more time on we may not be able to do an activity that we planned, but I'll describe the activity so that if it's something that you think would make sense to do with at your school, with the school team, a PLC, or colleagues, or just something to think about yourself, then please do that. I just don't think that we're going to have time to be able to go through that and see another 2 very short videos, so I may do some description with that as well, and you'll have the links that you can look at. But we'll see. We might try to do one. Oh, okay. So these 3 sources, without getting into them too heavily, were the documents that were referenced in creating the inquiry guide. They're more frameworks. The Environmental Education Resource Guide was the latest one that was developed, and these frameworks and resources also came out of a strategic plan that was started by Environmental Education Ontario about 10 years ago. The scope and sequence of expectations includes these. I'm going to skip ahead here. These learning, these learning of knowledge, skills, and attitudes inside of them. So that will also give you some good guidance in terms of how environmental education is going to relate to social studies, history, geography, and how it can be incorporated into other subject areas. I'm going to go back a little bit. What we are going to have you do for an activity, which we're not going to have time for, is in looking at environmental education. And then here, I'm going to show you the themes for social studies and geography across divisions. You could see how some of these would be a natural fit. And so in terms of looking at how environmental education is relevant to social studies, the activity that we were hoping to be able to do without technical difficulties and other communication difficulties was to actually have people in different groups go through, a small group choose one of these listed outcomes from knowledge. You could just take a really quick look at them. Skills and attitudes, and see how maybe highlight one and see how it is connected to social studies. And we are going to have you annotate using the text tool, this slide, to see how you might use one of these connections to do class projects. So that was the activity. We only have about 12 minutes left, so I hope just describing it is enough. All of this material is available on the OTF website, so you'll have it all listed for you. I'm just going to quickly say also that within the ministry document, the environmental education document, that these are listed, and they were adapted from the Learning for a Sustainable Future website, which is also an excellent website that you can go to for resources that integrate environmental education with social studies and geography, really, and across other subjects as well. And I'm just going to mention this because it's very relevant, since I just got an email about it today, which is they have just come up with another resource. And I know as a teacher, that's what I also hope to get out of webinars, is a lot of resources. Their resource is called Connecting the Dots, which key strategies that transform learning for environmental education, citizenship, and sustainability. So that also would be very, very relevant to the kinds of things that we're addressing in the webinar, so that's another resource that you can go to and you'll be able to find that on the Learning for Sustainable Future website. Okay. So moving forward, we'll try to give this, in fact, I think I'm actually going to play the other video that's coming forward, but just to quickly touch on this, this slide represents a page in another really great resource called, from a website called Natural Curiosity. It's also an actual resource. There's like a manual that that you can look in, and we used it to inspire us in coming up with the lessons in the OTF Inquiry Guide. The video that I had intended to show you from Natural Curiosity, again, like our other video, gives an example of an environmental inquiry in action, what inquiry might look like in an elementary social studies classroom. This had the environmental component to it, and it is right at the bottom. It is, we're not going to play it, but it's embedded into this page of the website at the bottom, and a great song goes along with it by Al City. So it was a very motivating video, really well done activity that was done at the Oise Lab School, the Eric Jackman School, Institute of Child Studies School. So this slide right here was from Natural Curiosity. Within the guide, you'll see that we have included lessons from grade 4 social studies and grade 7 geography, so that it gives you the inquiry-based framework within the lessons, as well as integrating and targeting environmental education using a lot of collaborative tasks and using field studies. Lynn had talked about the grade 7 lessons that were done in geography. In the grade 4 lessons, we have a lesson that models formulating questions, so one element of the inquiry process. We also have a lesson that talks to holding a knowledge building circle in your classroom, which is a great strategy for generating inquiry. It's a student-led question generating and knowledge building activity, as well as a field study lesson, and finally a lesson that looks at considering multiple perspectives on a renewable energy source from a wind farm that was owned and operated on a First Nations reserve on Manitoulin Island. So another, and so I apologize for sort of speeding through the rest of the slides, so please post any questions if you have them. We just wanted to also make sure in the next couple of slides that we touch on connections to Indigenous peoples, which is infused throughout the social studies, history, and geography curriculum. There's not only obvious content connections in many of the grades, but also in looking at perspectives and Aboriginal perspectives and worldviews, ways of thinking and ways of knowing. Those are ways to approach lessons and to also to embed inquiry, like just to sort of think about that in terms of taking Lynn's lesson on community and looking at it from an Aboriginal, infusing Aboriginal perspectives. You may want to have students talk about connections to land or landmarks. Some of those ideas are directly from grade 1 curriculum expectations, but they're all throughout the curriculum. The other thing we wanted to just quickly touch on is supporting students with special needs. I'm just going to go back throughout inquiry, because many of the activities, the problem-based learning or project-based learning or communication that goes along with these collaborative inquiries can be really hard for students with special needs, even working in groups. The social aspects and skills that are required to go along with that, as well as sort of reading content. So if we had time, I was going to try to get people's ideas for how they address this in their classroom. I quickly down here have a photograph, which would be a great sort of inquiry question. This photograph in terms of thinking of how someone might feel when they are perceived as not being very different and not necessarily able to complete tasks as easily as other students can when you're working in a large group. I'm just going to go back for 1 minute just to talk about this really quickly, this in terms of connections to Indigenous peoples, because this is also just very, very current. Last week in the Financial Post, this came out. This is a game that is coming out in the fall, and it's a company that is owned by an Indigenous community it's actually US based, but it's First Nations community in Alaska. And it's really done in the spirit of Aboriginal perspectives, which is having, I wish we could show it, I wish we had time. I really strongly suggest you to go and look at it. This trailer that I've put up here is, the trailer is actually spoken in an Indigenous language with subtitles on the bottom, and there's other equity issues that are embedded in it as well. This character on the slide right there is a girl, and it's looking at her adventures in the land. So I already like that equity piece that it's a girl with her companion there that's an Arctic fox, and it looks at all the interconnections, the Aboriginal worldviews. So that would be a great way to sort of introduce inquiry learning in that context of Aboriginal communities, meaning the needs of Aboriginal learners as well as non-Aboriginal learners. I know we're very short on time. We're hoping that this dialogue can continue because there's so much more to sort of have the discussion about. Since the curriculum is being implemented, like it's a mandatory implementation in the fall, I'm sure that there will be a PD that's coming up because you know, the questions that we continue to hear are, it's not just inquiry in one class. There really sort of needs to be a culture of inquiry in the school, and so a lot has to be done to set that up, to make students comfortable in a classroom to be able to ask questions. This document here on capacity building is actually pretty good about, or I shouldn't say pretty good, is quite good about sort of getting started with student inquiry across subjects. Other issues come up as well in terms of, someone had mentioned in the chat, it ends up taking possibly more time than what you had allowed in your original plan. So, so all of these sort of competing interests and in terms of trying to get through subject-specific content, as well as social studies specifically, you know, is not necessarily addressed in all school improvement plans. So these are conversations, really important conversations to have at school and with people in building in OESTA or other people who are looking at inquiry. We would love to hear if people want to write about some of this in the chat while I'm talking about OESTA a little bit. Is going forward, it would be interesting to sort of see what people used to think before we had started, and some of the things that you may have learned or some strategies that came up. If there's anything that you might do differently in your classroom in terms of how you might lead an inquiry, what things that you're still wondering about, because we can go back and certainly try to address some of these things possibly in future webinars or with OESTA PD that may be coming up, or through OTF. And I just wanted to let you know that certainly if anyone is interested, following the session on Thursday evenings, the Ontario Social Studies Teachers Association has a Twitter chat where you have the opportunity to have this kind of professional dialogue. It's for an hour from 9 to 10. It actually goes by really, really fast. And OESTA will be shortly posting a website which has many, many resources across subjects related to inquiry and related to social studies and environmental education. So please, please be on the lookout for that as a future reference in terms of where to go to look for resources to support you in social studies. So even though it was, wow, it's over, it was very, very fast, I hope that people were able to get some good ideas from the webinar. Please don't hesitate to email myself or Lynn, or you can also email OESTA directly, which is free to join at OESTA. Here's the website, oesta@gmail.com.
Thank you so much, Marcy and Lynn, for sharing this very valuable resource that can support teachers in the use of inquiry through the social studies curriculum, and for your very many examples and connections. Now I'm going to ask, I don't know if this is possible, I know many of you were inquiring on how to access this resource. Louise put the link in the chat box many times, but I'd asked Louise if she could give us a quick web tour so that when you go on the OTF website, you'll actually be able to do it on your own should you lose this link. So Louise, I'll turn it over to you right now.
Okay, let me just grab that link there. We are going to go to the teacher resources page of the OTF website, which, you just go to otf.feo.on.ca. Let me get this over here for a second. Okay, so yes, and it's under learning in the main tabs up across the top once you've gone past the landing page. And then over on the left-hand menu under the learning, you will find towards the bottom, because they're alphabetical, you will find the Teacher Resources tab. And once you click on that, you are on the Teacher Resources page. If you scroll down a little bit in your web tour there, you'll be able to see it. And the lesson plans link is where you're going to encounter a really nice search feature here. And I'm uncertain if what you are going to see is the same as what I see, but there's all kinds of filters there. So we are going to just check the filters for the one that we want here, which is environmental education. And we're also going to leave the box checked for, here we go, almost there, inquiry. And we're going to update those filters. I'm not sure that you guys are seeing exactly what I'm seeing, but it is just, you'll need to scroll way down over there at the left. Sorry, the other left, your right, and you will see the inquiry guide supporting teachers in the use of inquiry. Yes, and you can look under by social studies as well. And once you're on that page, you will see that you can download the entire lesson plan. It will be a whole folder of zipped files, and it includes the guide as well as the 8 lessons that go with it. And there are many, many other resources there. If you take the time to explore, there's some connecting to the natural world that STAO produced with OTF, and we had a recent OTF Connect session regarding that as well. So definitely explore the OTF Connect's past resources page. Leslie, I see that you can't see anything, so I'm going to push us back to our feedback page there. There was so much talked about tonight and so much more that you can do, and I know Siri is going to say a little more about some of the other offerings that are very, very directly connected with this session that are coming up for OTF.
Thank you, Louise. And as Louise was mentioning, when you go on the OTF website on the lesson plan teacher resources, when we worked in collaboration with OESTA, we also worked with STAO and other organizations, and STAO also developed a great resource called Connecting to the Natural World, which again is an environmental focus, again supporting the new social studies curriculum. So there's 2 excellent resources right there on the OTF website for you. So thank you to each of you for giving of your time tonight to participate. Sharing your thoughts in the chats and asking questions. That was great to see. Take a few minutes, please, if you don't mind, and fill in the exit survey that Louise has posted there on the slide, the tiny URL. That'll give us, hopefully you can give us your feedback about tonight's session. If this is the type of resource and these are the type of support that you're going to need next year, please let us know. We have 1 session left, so we're already looking ahead at planning for next year. So it's really important to us to have your feedback so that we know how to best support you. Next week, on June the 5th, we've got one session, which is Coming of Age in the Digital Age with Shanna Burns and Ryan Bro from the 4th R. Another thing that I would like to mention to you is that this summer, OTF is once again offering the Summer Institutes, and they are 3-day intensive workshops across the province. You get food, you get accommodation, you get a partial travel allowance, so it's a great opportunity for fabulous PD that you can attend this summer. And they're done in collaboration with different subject associations. So it's certainly something that I would highly encourage you to check out. So thank you again so much, Marcy and Lynn, for the great presentation tonight, and to each of you for giving your time to be with us. Your comments are very valuable, so if you want to send us email to OTF Connect, or again, put your comments in the feedback, greatly appreciated. Good night, everyone.